My brother spit. Trash, fit for manual labor. At his gala, parents gave him the estate, saying, "We're proud," unlike the disgrace. I sat quiet until a stranger handed me a file. Time to take it all. My name is Mallory Nash. I am 34 years old, and for the last 20 minutes, I have been standing over a chipped porcelain sink, trying to scrub the evidence of my existence off my own skin. The water running from the tap was scalding hot, steam rising up to fog the mirror, masking my reflection in a haze of gray. It was better that way. I did not want to see the face that my father looked at with disappointment and my mother looked at with thinly veiled disgust. I grabbed the bar of heavy-duty pumice soap again. It was a block of gritty, orange-scented chemicals designed for mechanics and industrial workers, the kind of soap that felt like sandpaper against the flesh. I lathered it between my palms, the friction creating a raw, burning sensation, but I did not stop. I scrubbed my knuckles until they turned a violent shade of red. I dug my nails into the calluses on my palms. I scrubbed until my skin felt tight and feverish, stripped of its natural oils, stripped of everything except the truth. But no matter how hard I pushed, no matter how much I flayed my own skin, I could still see it. Or perhaps I just felt it. That faint, dark outline of grease under my fingernails. The smell of hydraulic fluid and machine oil that seemed to have seeped past the epidermis and into my very DNA. It was a smell that clung to my hair, my clothes, and my sheets. It was the smell of the factory. It was the smell of labor. My brother, Barrett, always smelled like expensive sandalwood cologne and the crisp, sterile scent of new money. I smelled like hard work and minimum wage. I finally turned off the tap. The sudden silence in my apartment was heavy, pressing in on my ears. It was a small, one-bedroom unit in Hialeah, a neighborhood of concrete and chain-link fences, sandwiched between a noisy auto body shop and the constant roar of a highway overpass. The walls were thin, painted a depressing shade of beige that I was not allowed to change. Through the plaster, I could hear my neighbor, an elderly man named Mr. Henderson, coughing his dry, rattling cough. It sounded like the ventilation fans at the factory when the bearings were starting to go. My phone buzzed on the laminate countertop, vibrating against a stack of unpaid utility bills. I did not want to look at it. My stomach tightened, a physical reaction to the digital summons. I knew who it was. It was always them. But old habits, formed over decades of subservience, die hard. I dried my hands on a towel that had seen better days, the fabric rough and thinning, and glanced at the screen. It was a text message from Barrett. "Don't come in the front entrance. It confuses the valet. Park across the street and use the service door near the dumpsters. Try not to look like you just clocked out." I stared at the glowing words, reading them over and over until they blurred. There was no greeting. No "hello, sister." Just a command and an insult wrapped in efficiency. I felt a familiar tightening in my chest, a cocktail of shame and a dull, aching anger that I had learned to swallow years ago. It sat in my gut like a stone. I looked at the dress hanging on the back of the bathroom door. It was navy blue, simple, modest. I had bought it from a consignment shop 3 towns over, driving 45 minutes just so I wouldn't run into anyone I knew while shopping for secondhand clothes. It was clean. It was decent. But I knew, with a sinking certainty, that next to the custom-tailored Italian suits and the designer silk gowns that would be floating through the Hilton ballroom tonight, it would look exactly like what it was. A costume. A disguise. A poor woman playing dress-up, pretending she belonged at a table where she wasn't even allowed to hold the fork. Tonight was the night. The night Barrett officially became CEO of Nash Enterprises. The night my parents, Richard and Cynthia, would ascend to their final form of smug self-satisfaction, presenting their golden child to the world. And I was required to be there. Not because they wanted me, not because they missed me, but because they needed the optics of family unity for the press photos. I was a prop, a dark, slightly embarrassing background character used to make Barrett's light shine brighter by comparison. "You can do this, Mallory," I whispered to the empty, humid room. "Just show up. Keep your head down. Smile when they look at you. Don't speak unless spoken to. Then come home." It was the mantra of my life, the survival code I had written for myself at age 18. Keep your head down. Do the work. Don't make waves. I reached for the dress. The synthetic fabric felt stiff against my raw, scrubbed hands. I pulled it on, zipping it up with difficulty, my fingers fumbling. It was a little loose in the waist. I had lost weight recently, mostly from skipping lunches to save money for the new transmission my car desperately needed. I walked out of the apartment, locking the deadbolt behind me with a heavy click. The air outside was thick and humid, a wet blanket that smelled of exhaust fumes, rotting garbage, and impending rain. My car, a dented Honda Civic with 200,000 miles on the odometer, sat in the spot marked 4B. The bumper was held on by silver duct tape that I had carefully painted over with gray model paint to try and match the body. It was an ugly, scarred, reliable machine. Just like me. The traffic on the I-95 heading south toward Miami Beach was a parking lot. A sea of red taillights stretched out as far as the eye could see, blurring in the heat shimmer rising from the baking asphalt. My air conditioning had died 3 years ago, and I couldn't afford the $1,000 to fix the compressor, so I had the windows rolled down. The cacophony of the city, horns blaring, reggaeton blasting from passing cars, the roar of engines, filled the cabin. The humid Florida air rushed in, heavy and sticky, instantly starting to frizz the hair I had spent 30 minutes straightening. To my left, a sleek white convertible merged aggressively into my lane. The driver, a man in a linen suit with sunglasses that probably cost more than my monthly rent, glanced at my car. His eyes traveled over the dented fender, the taped bumper, and then landed on me. He wrinkled his nose in visible distaste before revving his engine and speeding up to cut me off, leaving me in a cloud of exhaust. I didn't honk. I didn't yell. I was used to it. In this city, your car was your cast, and I was an untouchable. I was invisible debris on the road to paradise. As I idled there, foot cramping on the brake, staring at the personalized license plate of the car in front of me, my mind drifted back to the question that haunted me every day. Why? Why was I here? Why was I the one scraping grease off my hands while Barrett was getting manicures and facials? It wasn't always this way. I wasn't born the slow one, despite what my father told his golf buddies at the country club. I wasn't born simple, despite how my mother introduced me to her socialite friends. I remembered the letter, the thick envelope from Georgia Tech. When I was 18, I had a future. I had a full-ride acceptance for the engineering program. I loved machines. I understood them. They made sense in a way people never did. Machines had logic. Input, output. Cause, effect. If a machine broke, there was a reason, and there was a way to fix it. People just broke, and they lied about why. But 2 weeks before I was supposed to pack my bags and leave this toxicity behind, the crash happened. Barrett, then 19 and already flunking out of his second expensive private college, got into trouble. Real trouble. He had crashed a sports car, a car my father had bought him for getting a C average, while high on something illegal. He wasn't alone. There was a girl in the passenger seat. She was injured. Badly. The legal fees to keep him out of prison were astronomical. The settlement to the girl's family to keep it quiet and out of the newspapers was even higher. It was a fortune. I remembered the kitchen table meeting. The air was cold, despite it being summer. Dad didn't even look at me. He stared at the wall as he spoke. Mallory, we have to make sacrifices. This is a crisis. Barrett has a future to protect. He is the heir. We need your college fund. All of it. But it's my scholarship money too, I had said, my voice small, trembling. I earned that. I can work while I study. We need cash now. Mom had snapped, her eyes red from crying. She was crying for Barrett, for the stress he was under. She never cried for me. Don't be selfish, Mallory. For once in your life, think about the family. Family comes first. So the money went. The lawyers got paid. The girl's family signed a non-disclosure agreement. Barrett got probation and a clean record, erased as if it never happened. And I got a job at the processing plant to help out for a few months, until the family finances stabilized. Just a few months, honey, Dad had said. Those months turned into 16 years. Barrett went on to get a degree from an online university that Dad paid for, cheating his way through every exam. I stayed on the assembly line, watching my dreams rust alongside the machinery. I watched my hands turn from soft to calloused. I watched my spark fade. I gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. They called it a sacrifice. But a sacrifice is something you choose to give. This was a theft. They stole my future to pave the road for Barrett. And the worst part? Every time I achieved something, A promotion to line supervisor, a national safety certification, a commendation for efficiency. They looked at me with pity. Good for you, honey, Mom would say, sipping her wine. It's nice you found something simple, something you can handle. Simple. That was their word for me. Simple Mallory. Dependable Mallory. The draft horse that pulls the cart through the mud so the show pony can trot on the pavement. I finally reached the causeway. The skyline of Miami Beach rose up across the water like a kingdom of glass and light. It was beautiful, shimmering in the twilight, and absolutely cruel. Somewhere in one of those glittering towers, my family was drinking champagne that cost more than my car. I checked the time on the dashboard clock. 6:30. I was going to be late. And in the Nash family, being late was a sin almost as bad as being poor. A siren wailed in the distance, cutting through the radio static and the thrum of traffic. It was a long, mournful sound that made my stomach drop. It triggered a memory I tried to keep locked away in the darkest corners of my mind. A memory from 8 months ago that changed everything, even if my family didn't know it yet. The traffic stopped completely. I closed my eyes, and suddenly, I wasn't in my car. I was back there. It was a Tuesday night shift. The factory was humming with the usual rhythm. The rhythmic clanking of the conveyor belts, the hiss of pneumatic presses, the shouting of men over the roar of the furnaces. I was doing a final check on the pressure valves in Sector 4. Then, the sound changed. It wasn't a bang. It was a whine. A high-pitched, piercing whine, like a tea kettle about to scream, but amplified 1,000 times. I knew that sound. My engineering brain identified it instantly. It was the main methane release valve. It was failing. The seal was disintegrating under pressure. Before I could even grab my radio, the alarm shattered the air. Beep, beep, beep. The sound was deafening. The emergency lights strobed red, turning the factory floor into a nightmare disco of shadows and panic. Evacuate. Move. Everyone out. The supervisor, a man named Gary who had gotten the job because he was the owner's nephew and spent most of his time watching videos on his phone, was screaming. But he wasn't helping. He was running. He was running toward the loading dock, pushing workers out of his way, blocking the narrow exit with his bulk in his desperation to save himself. Panic erupted. It was chaos. People were shoving, tripping over pallets, abandoning their stations. I smelled it then, the rotten egg stench of methane, thick, heavy, and suffocating. It was filling the lower levels. A single spark, from a boot scraping metal, from a light switch, from a static discharge, would turn this entire building into a crater. I ran, but I didn't run toward the door. I ran toward the wine. Mallory, what are you doing? You'll die? Run, someone screamed at me. I think it was Old Man Miller, grasping at my sleeve. I shook him off. Go, get the others out. I didn't look back. My legs pumped, my steel-toed boots slamming against the concrete. My brain, the one my parents said was slow, the one they said was unfit for business, was calculating the flow rate, the pressure per square inch, the blast radius. If that valve wasn't closed manually within 60 seconds, the pressure would blow the regulator. The explosion wouldn't just kill us, it would level the city block. It would kill the night shift. It would kill the cleaning crew. It would kill the drivers waiting outside. I reached the maintenance platform. The air was hazy with gas. My eyes watered instantly. My throat burned as if I had swallowed acid. The wheel for the manual override was rusted tight. It hadn't been serviced in years. Budget cuts, management had said. Deferred maintenance. I grabbed the wheel with both hands. It was hot, searing hot from the friction of the escaping gas. Come on, I grunted, gritting my teeth so hard I thought they would crack. I pulled with everything I had. Every year of frustration, every year of lifting heavy boxes, every year of being called weak, every year of being invisible. I channeled it all into my arms. I poured my rage into that wheel. The metal groaned. The skin on my palms blistered immediately, the smell of burning flesh mixing with the methane. I screamed, a raw, primal sound that tore my throat and threw my entire body weight against the iron. Clang. It turned. Just an inch. But it turned. I spun it frantically, ignoring the agony in my hands. 1 rotation. 2. The whining noise began to drop in pitch. My vision was tunneling. Black spots danced before my eyes. I couldn't breathe. The air was poison. But I kept turning until the valve locked shut with a final, decisive thud. The whining stopped. I slumped against the railing, gasping for air that wasn't there, retching dryly. Below me, the floor was empty. They had made it out. I watched the strobing red lights until they blurred into darkness, and the concrete floor rose up to meet me. I woke up in the county hospital 2 days later with chemical pneumonia and second-degree burns on my hands. My lungs felt like they were filled with broken glass. No one from my family came. Not one visitor. I had called my mom, gasping through the oxygen mask, desperate to hear a friendly voice to tell her I was alive. "Oh, Mallory," she had said, sounding annoyed, the noise of a restaurant in the background. "We're in the middle of a tasting for Barrett's Gala. Is it serious? Or is this another one of your dramatic work stories?" I had an accident," I whispered, tears leaking into the mask. "There was a fire, a leak. Well, put some ointment on it. We're very busy, dear. Send me a picture if you need insurance money, but don't expect us to drive all the way out there tonight. Traffic is dreadful." Click. She hung up. I looked at the scars on my palms as I drove over the bridge to the Hilton. They were faded now, pink, jagged lines that ran across my lifelines, shiny and tight. To my parents, they were just ugly blemishes, evidence of my low-class life. To me, they were the only proof I had that my life had meaning. I had saved 47 people that night. 47 fathers, mothers, sons, and daughters. And my own father didn't even know. He didn't care to know. I pulled up to the main entrance of the Hilton Miami Beach. The valet stand was a flurry of activity, a scene of choreographed opulence. Rolls-Royces, Bentleys, and low-slung Ferraris were lined up like a parade of wealth. Drivers in white gloves opened doors for women dripping in diamonds and men in tuxedos. When I eased my Honda Civic into the queue, the contrast was violent. The engine sputtered, a distinct rattling sound echoing off the marble pillars. The head valet, a man with a perfectly groomed mustache and a sneer practiced on 1,000 tourists, actually stepped out to block me physically. He waved his hand dismissively, pointing toward the side of the building, not even making eye contact. "Deliveries and staff in the rear," he shouted over the purr of a Lamborghini engine. I rolled down my window, the manual crank squeaking. "I'm a guest," I said, my voice sounding thin in the open air. "Mallory Nash. I'm here for the Nash promotion party." He stopped. He looked at my car. He looked at the peeling clear coat on the hood. He looked at my face, devoid of professional makeup because I had sweated it off in the traffic. He looked at my dress. "I'm sorry, miss," he said, his tone dripping with fake politeness. "The main valet is full, reserved for VIPs. You'll have to self-park in the public garage 3 blocks down, or use the service lot behind the kitchens." I didn't argue. I didn't have the energy to fight a valet. I drove to the service lot, parking between a catering van smelling of fish and an overflowing dumpster. I walked back to the hotel, the humidity clinging to me like a second skin. By the time I reached the building, my hair was frizzing uncontrollably, and I could feel a bead of sweat trickling down my back. I couldn't go in the front door now. I was too embarrassed. I found a side entrance near the loading bays. I walked through a long, fluorescent-lit hallway that smelled of roasting beef, industrial sanitizer, and wet floor mops. I dodged waiters carrying heavy trays of hors d'oeuvres, making myself small, pressing against the wall to let them pass. I was the ghost in the machine of their luxury. I emerged into the ballroom's foyer, and the blast of air conditioning hit me, chilling my damp skin instantly. The room was breathtaking. It was a cathedral of capitalism. Crystal chandeliers the size of small cars hung from the ceiling, casting a warm, golden glow over the crowd. The tables were draped in heavy silk. There was an ice sculpture of a lion, the company mascot, melting slowly in the center of a seafood buffet that probably cost more than my yearly salary. "Mallory." I turned to see a hand waving from a corner table, far away from the stage, near the emergency exit. It was Aunt Deb. Aunt Deb was my mother's sister, but they couldn't be more different. Where my mother was all sharp angles, Botox, and diamonds, Aunt Deb was soft curves, polyester, and comfortable shoes. She was a nurse in Tampa, working double shifts in the ER. She was the only person in the family who actually worked for a living besides me. She was the only one who sent me a card on my birthday. I walked over, keeping my head down, trying to avoid the gaze of the elites. "Oh, honey," Deb said, standing up and pulling me into a hug. She smelled like lavender laundry detergent and peppermint gum. It was the smell of safety. It was the smell of the only love I had known. You look tired. I'm fine, Aunt Deb. I lied, pulling away and smoothing my dress. Just a long week. The inventory audit. They shouldn't make you come to these things on a work night, she muttered, straightening the collar of my dress with motherly fussiness. It's cruel. Did you eat? Not since breakfast. Here. She opened her oversized purse, a sensible bag, not a clutch, and slipped me a granola bar. Eat this quickly before the sharks start circling. Richard is already on his third scotch, and Cynthia is on the warpath. I unwrapped the bar under the table and took a bite. It tasted like sawdust, but I was grateful. I looked across the room. There they were. My parents. Richard was holding court with a group of investors, laughing loudly, his face flushed with alcohol and pride. Cynthia was beside him, glittering in a silver gown that clung to her surgically enhanced figure, looking like an ice queen surveying her domain. And in the center, basking in the attention, was Barrett. He looked perfect. I had to give him that. His suit was midnight blue, tailored to within an inch of its life. His hair was coiffed. He was shaking hands, clapping men on the back, flashing that charming, empty smile that had gotten him out of every trouble he'd ever caused. He looked like a CEO. He looked like a leader. It was an excellent performance. I felt a hand on my elbow, a grip like a vice, sharp fingernails digging into the tender flesh. You're late, my father hissed in my ear. I hadn't even seen him approach. I jumped, turning to face him. Traffic was bad, Dad. I don't care about traffic, Richard cut me off. He didn't look at me. He kept his eyes on the room, smiling for the crowd, waving at a passing banker while he dug his fingers into my arm. Go sit at the back table. Table 19. Do not speak to the investors. Do not tell anyone where you work. If anyone asks, you're consulting. Got it? Yes, Dad. Good. We need you for the signature later. Don't disappear. And for God's sake, fix your hair. You look like you just walked out of a wind tunnel. He released me and walked away, wiping his hand on his jacket as if touching me had dirted his suit. I took my seat at table 19. It was the overflow table, placed so far back it was practically in the kitchen. I was seated next to a deaf elderly cousin I hadn't seen in years, and a few mid-level managers who looked terrified to be there, clearly worried about their jobs. Dinner was served, filet mignon and lobster tail with truffle butter. I ate quickly, feeling the hunger gnaw at me. I saw my mother glance in my direction from the head table. She frowned, making a subtle, sharp gesture with her hand. Slow down. I put my fork down immediately. Even from 50 feet away, she could make me feel like a clumsy, uncultured child. The lights dimmed. The murmuring of the crowd died down. A spotlight hit the stage, illuminating the podium. Ladies and gentlemen, the announcer boomed over the speakers. Please welcome the new CEO of Nash Enterprises, the visionary, the future, Mr. Barrett Nash. Applause erupted. It was polite, expensive applause. Barrett bounded onto the stage, looking energetic and youthful. He grabbed the microphone with the confidence of a man who has never been told no. Thank you. Thank you all. Barrett beamed, soaking it in. Wow, what a night. I look out at this room, and I see family. I see loyalty. He started his speech. It was a collection of buzzwords he'd probably paid a consultant thousands of dollars to write. Synergy, paradigm shifts, legacy, innovation. He talked about how hard he had worked to get here. I almost laughed out loud. Hard work? Barrett had interned at the company for 6 months, mostly playing golf with clients and taking 3-hour lunches. He failed the bar exam twice. He had never stayed past 5 o'clock in his life. He didn't know the names of the janitors. He didn't know how the machines worked. But seriously, Barrett said, leaning against the podium, adopting a casual, just one of the guys tone that he had practiced in the mirror. Success isn't just about me. It's about genes. It's about that Nash DNA. He chuckled, and the room chuckled with him. My father built this. My grandfather built the foundation. It takes a certain kind of mind to lead, a certain kind of sharpness, a hunger. His eyes scanned the room. I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. Don't look at me. Please, don't look at me. His gaze landed on table 19. On me. But, you know, Barrett grinned, a cruel, predatory glint in his eyes. Genetics is a funny thing. Sometimes it skips a beat. Sometimes you get a thoroughbred, and sometimes. He paused for effect, letting the silence hang. Sometimes you get a plow horse. The room went quiet for a second, then a ripple of nervous laughter spread. I love my sister, Mallory, Barrett said, his voice dripping with fake affection, broadcasting my humiliation to the world. She's here tonight. Wave, Mal. She's sitting in the back. You know, Mallory has found her true calling. While we are up here closing deals and shaping the future, she's keeping it real at the factory. Some people are born to lead, and some are just born to scrub the floors the leaders walk on. The laughter was louder this time. 80 people, 80 wealthy, powerful people were laughing. Not with me, at me. They were laughing at my life. They were laughing at my hands. I froze. I wanted to disappear. I wanted the floor to open up and swallow me whole. I could feel the heat rising in my cheeks, a burning, agonizing humiliation that brought hot tears to my eyes. I stared at the white tablecloth, focusing on a crumb of bread, wishing I was dead. I wished I had died in that fire. At least then I would have died a hero, not a punchline. But hey, Barrett continued, enjoying the crowd's reaction. We need clean floors, right? Let's hear it for the sanitation crew. He clapped. A few people clapped along, confused, awkwardly following his lead. My father was beaming. He looked proud. Proud of his son for putting the dumb one in her place. Proud of his son for asserting dominance. The speech continued, but I couldn't hear the words anymore. It was just a buzzing sound in my ears, like a swarm of angry wasps. I felt Aunt Deb's hand on my knee under the table. She was squeezing hard, her nails digging in through the fabric of my dress. Don't you cry, she whispered fiercely, leaning close. Do not give them the satisfaction. Hold your head up, Mallory. I blinked back the tears. I took a deep, shuddering breath. She was right. I wouldn't cry. I had faced fire. I had faced explosions. I had faced death. I could face a spoiled brat with a microphone. Barrett finally wrapped up his speech. And now, he announced, my parents have a special surprise. Richard and Cynthia walked onto the stage. Mom was holding a velvet box. Dad was holding a large, leather-bound folder. Son, Richard said, his voice booming, full of theatrical emotion. We are so proud of you. You are everything a father could hope for. Smart, charismatic, a winner. He handed the folder to Barrett. To celebrate your promotion, we are transferring the deed to the Mauna Kea Resort in Hawaii to your name. $85 million of prime oceanfront real estate. It's yours to manage. Yours to rule. The room gasped. $85 million. It was an incomprehensible amount of money. And, Mom chimed in, opening the velvet box. She pulled out a key fob. You need to arrive in style. The 2025 Audi R8 parked out front is yours. Barrett hooped, grabbing the keys. He held them up like a trophy, grinning like a shark. But, Richard said, raising a hand to quiet the applause. Business is business. To make this transfer legal, we need to tie up a loose end. He turned to the microphone. Mallory, come up here, please. My heart stopped. This was it. The ambush. Come on, honey, Mom called out, her voice sickly sweet, waving me over. Just for a minute. I stood up. My legs felt like lead. I walked the long walk from the back of the room to the stage. I could feel every pair of eyes on me. The girl with the cheap dress. The plow horse. The scrubber of floors. The mistake. I climbed the stairs. The stage lights were blinding, hot against my face. Dad put an arm around my shoulder. It felt heavy and fake. He steered me toward the podium where a document was waiting. As many of you know, Dad addressed the crowd, adopting a somber tone. My mother, Rose Nash, passed away recently. Her estate is still in probate. To simplify things and ensure Barrett can take control immediately, Mallory has graciously agreed to sign an interim asset waiver. He looked at me, his smile not reaching his eyes. His eyes were cold, hard stones. She knows she's not cut out for the complexities of high-level management. She's happy with her simpler life. Right, Mallory? He pushed a heavy fountain pen into my hand. I looked at the document. It was a dense legal text, but the title was clear, bolded in black. Total waiver of inheritance and asset claim. It wasn't just about the resort. It was everything. If I signed this, I was giving up any claim to anything Grandma Rose might have left me. Not that I expected much. Probably just some old jewelry or her knitting supplies, but the principle of it stung. They wanted to erase me completely. Sign it, Dad whispered, leaning in close so only I could hear. His breath smelled of expensive scotch and decay. Sign it, or I stop co-signing the lease on your apartment. You'll be homeless by Monday. I will ruin your credit. I will make sure you never work in this town again. The threat hung in the air between us, invisible but lethal. Homeless. He knew I lived paycheck to paycheck. He knew I couldn't qualify for a new lease with my current credit score, a score that was ruined because I had taken out high-interest loans to pay for my own medical bills after the fire, bills the company insurance had denied because of a safety protocol technicality my father had invented to save on premiums. I looked at Barrett. He was leaning against the podium, twirling the Audi keys around his finger, smirking. He looked bored. To him, this was just paperwork. He didn't care that he was stripping me of my dignity. He didn't care that he was taking everything while I had nothing. He believed he deserved it. He believed he was chosen. Come on, Mal, Barrett muttered, checking his watch. People are waiting for dessert. Don't be dramatic. Just sign the line, Mallory, Mom hissed from the other side. Her smile fixed for the cameras, but her voice venomous. Don't be difficult. I looked out at the crowd. They were watching with mild interest, like they were watching a play. None of them knew what was really happening. They just saw a loving family handling business. They saw the benevolence of the rich parents and the cooperation of the dutiful daughter. I looked at the pen. It was a Mont Blanc, heavy and cold. Gold-plated. It probably cost more than my entire car. I felt trapped. If I didn't sign, I lost my home. If I signed, I lost my self-respect. But what was self-respect worth when you were sleeping in a Honda Civic in a Walmart parking lot? I lowered the pen to the paper. My hand was shaking uncontrollably now. The tip of the pen touched the paper. A blob of black ink bled out, spreading like a dark stain on the pristine white page. It looked like the grease on my hands, like the soot from the fire, like the darkness that had followed me my whole life. Good girl, Dad whispered. Just do it. Be useful for once. I pressed down. I started to write the first letter of my name. M. Before we see if Mallory breaks free, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and comment your city below. Every comment helps this story reach more people who need to see justice served. Where are you watching from? Let us know. The letter M was crooked. My hand refused to move further. It was as if my body was rebelling against my brain. My brain said survive, but my soul screamed fight. I thought about the heat of the fire. I thought about the moment I grabbed that burning valve. I didn't hesitate then. I didn't ask for permission. I didn't worry about what people would think. I just did what was right. Why couldn't I do that now? Why was I so brave for others, but so cowardly for myself? Mallory. Dad's whisper was a growl now, vibrating with suppressed rage. Don't embarrass us. Finish the signature. I looked up at him. Really looked at him. For the first time in years, I didn't see the titan of industry. I saw the lines of greed around his eyes. I saw the fear behind his bluster. He wasn't a strong man. He was a bully. And bullies are always afraid. He was afraid of me. He was afraid of what I represented. I looked at the ink stain on my thumb. It wasn't dirt. It was proof that I worked. Proof that I built things. Proof that I saved things. I started to speak, my voice raspy, dry as dust. What? Barrett snapped, stepping closer. Speak up. Stop mumbling. I need to read it first, I said, louder this time. My voice shook, but the words were clear. You don't need to read it, Richard said, laughing nervously for the crowd, patting my back a little too hard. It's standard legalese. Boring stuff. Just sign. No, I said. The word felt strange in my mouth, heavy and foreign. I won't sign what I haven't read. Dad grabbed my wrist. Hard. His fingernails dug into the soft skin of my inner arm, hidden by his sleeve. Sign the damn paper, you ungrateful little BM. The double doors at the back of the ballroom didn't just open. They slammed against the walls with a sound like a gunshot. The entire room jumped. The music cut out instantly. Every head turned toward the entrance. Standing there, framed by the light of the hallway, was an old man. He was leaning on a cane, wearing a charcoal suit that was 20 years out of style but pressed to sharp perfection. He held a battered, vintage leather briefcase in one hand. It was Mr. Abernathy, my grandmother's personal attorney. He was supposed to be retired. He was supposed to be in a nursing home in Boca Raton. But there he stood, looking like an Old Testament prophet who had just walked out of the desert to deliver judgment. Richard let go of my wrist as if it burned him. His face went pale, draining of all color. "Security," he shouted, his voice cracking. "Get this man out of here. He's trespassing." Two security guards, burly men in black suits, started to move toward Mr. Abernathy. The old man didn't flinch. He didn't back down. He raised his cane and pointed it at the guards like a sword. "If you touch me," he boomed, his voice shockingly deep and powerful for his age, echoing off the vaulted ceiling, "I will have you arrested for assault and obstruction of federal justice. I am an officer of the court." The guards stopped in their tracks. They looked at Richard, then at the fierce old man, and decided they didn't get paid enough for this. They stepped back, raising their hands in surrender. Mr. Abernathy began to walk toward the stage. Thump, step, thump, step. The sound of his cane on the marble floor echoed in the silent room. Every eye was glued to him. "Who invited you, Abernathy?" Dad yelled, trying to regain control, sweat beading on his forehead. "This is a private event. You are not welcome here." "I invited myself," Mr. Abernathy said calmly, reaching the foot of the stage. He looked up at me. His eyes were kind, crinkled at the corners. They were the first kind eyes I had seen all night besides Aunt Deb's. "Hello, Mallory." "Mr. Abernathy?" I whispered, confused. "What are you doing here?" He turned to the crowd. "I am here on behalf of the estate of Rose Nash, and I am here to stop a crime in progress." "This is ridiculous," Cynthia shrieked, clutching her pearls. "Rose's will is already filed. It's public record. Barrett gets the company. Richard gets the assets. It's done." "That will," Mr. Abernathy said, placing his briefcase on the stage and snapping the brass latches open with a loud click-click, "was drafted 3 years ago. However," he pulled out a thick document sealed with red wax. "Rose Nash came to see me 4 months ago, just before she died. She drafted a new will. A final testament." He held it up. The red seal gleamed under the stage lights like a drop of blood, and she left strict instructions that it was only to be revealed if— He paused, looking directly at Richard, his gaze piercing. "If an attempt was made to coerce Mallory Nash into signing away her rights." He pointed a gnarled finger at the ink-stained paper on the podium. "Which, I believe, is exactly what we are witnessing. This is a forgery," Barrett yelled, stepping forward, his face twisting into a mask of panic. Grandma was senile. She didn't know what she was doing. She thought the toaster was a radio. "On the contrary," Mr. Abernathy said, his voice ice cold. She was quite lucid, sharp as a tack. In fact, she anticipated this exact reaction. She recorded a video statement to accompany the document. "Would you like to see it?" He didn't wait for an answer. He pulled a tablet from his bag and connected it to the HDMI cable on the podium, hijacking the massive screen behind us that was displaying Barrett's triumphant face. The screen flickered, static danced for a moment, and then, there she was. Grandma Rose. She was sitting in her favorite floral armchair, looking frail, but her eyes were sharp, intelligent, and alive. She spoke directly to the camera. "Hello, Richard." "Hello, Cynthia." Grandma's voice filled the room. It was raspy, but clear. "If you are watching this, it means I am gone. And it means you tried to cheat Mallory. Again." The crowd murmured, a wave of shock rippling through the room. Richard looked like he was going to vomit. He gripped the podium for support. "I know what you did," Grandma continued. "I know you drained Mallory's college fund to pay for Barrett's DUI. I know you lied to me and said she chose not to go to school because she wasn't academic." Gasps erupted from the audience. I felt tears prick my eyes again. She knew. All this time, she knew. I thought she was disappointed in me, but she knew the truth. "I watched you," Grandma said, staring into the camera, staring into our souls. "I watched you treat your son like a prince and your daughter like a servant. I watched Barrett fail every business venture I gave him money for. The crypto scheme, the restaurant. And I watched Mallory." She smiled, a soft, sad smile that broke my heart. "I watched Mallory work. I saw her hands. Rough, damaged, honest. Barrett," Grandma said, her voice hardening. "You are a weak man. You have no spine. You have no honor. You are not fit to run a lemonade stand, let alone my empire." Barrett's mouth hung open. The Audi keys dangled limply from his fingers. "Mallory," Grandma said. "My brave girl. I leave it all to you. The company, the properties, the stocks, everything. You are the only Nash worthy of the name. Do good with it." The video cut to black. The silence in the room was absolute. You could hear the hum of the air conditioning. You could hear the ice melting in the sculptures. "This is insane," Richard sputtered, his face turning purple. She was clearly manipulated. Mallory must have brainwashed her. This is elder abuse. Mallory hasn't seen Rose in 6 months because you forbade her from visiting. Mr. Abernathy snapped. But Rose saw Mallory. She hired a private investigator to check on her. He reached into the briefcase again. "Do you know what this is?" He pulled out a stack of papers clipped together. "This is the OSHA incident report from the factory fire 8 months ago. The one you tried to bury." He held it up. "It details a catastrophic methane leak. It details the cowardice of the shift supervisor who fled. And it details the actions of one employee." He began to read, his voice ringing out like a bell. Employee Mallory Nash, despite lack of protective gear, entered the hazard zone. She manually sealed the compromised valve, suffering chemical burns and smoke inhalation. Her actions prevented a structural failure that would have resulted in an estimated 100% casualty rate for the shift. Abernathy looked at the crowd. She saved 47 lives that night. 47. While her family was tasting cake for this party. He pulled out a bundle of letters tied with a ribbon. "And these? These are letters from those workers. They sent them to Rose because they knew she was the owner. They wanted her to know who saved them." He opened one. "This is from a man named Elias Miller. He writes, 'I have 3 grandkids. Because of your granddaughter, I got to see them graduate last week. She walked into hell so I could walk home. She is a hero.'" He slammed the letter down on the podium. "That is leadership, Mr. Barrett. Not a suit. Not a title. It is the willingness to burn so that others may live." I looked at the crowd. The expressions had changed. The mockery was gone. The women in the pearls were dabbing their eyes. The men were looking at me with something new. Respect. All. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel small. I felt 10 feet tall. I stood straighter. "But wait," Mr. Abernathy said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "There is more." He turned to Barrett. "You claim to be a philanthropist, don't you, son? The Barrett Nash Orphanage Fund?" Barrett started sweating profusely. We do good work. We help kids." "Do you?" Abernathy pulled out a spreadsheet. "I have the forensic accounting here. In the last 3 years, the fund raised $2 million. How much went to orphans?" He scanned the paper. "0. That's a lie." Barrett screamed. "That's slander. 1.8 million went to consulting fees paid to a shell company registered in the Cayman Islands." Abernathy read. "A company owned by Barrett Nash. It paid for your trips to Dubai. It paid for your cars. It paid for the watch on your wrist right now. And the other 200,000. Abernathy looked at Aunt Deb. "Margaret, would you please?" Aunt Deb stood up. She walked to the stage, her head held high, looking majestic in her polyester dress. She pulled a crumpled piece of notebook paper from her purse. "This is an IOU," Aunt Deb announced to the room. 2 years ago, Mallory borrowed $5,000 from me. She said the factory didn't have enough fire extinguishers. Management refused to buy them, so she bought them herself. With her own money. She paid me back $50 a week. In cash. She held up the note. She starved herself to keep those workers safe. She skipped meals. She wore old clothes. While you," she pointed at Barrett, her finger trembling with righteous anger, "stole from orphans to buy champagne." "Enough," Richard roared. He lunged for the papers on the podium. "Give me that. This is my company." Before Richard could touch the documents, the side doors burst open again. A man in a gray suit ran in, looking terrified, clutching a phone. It was Mr. Collins, the company CFO. "Mr. Nash." "Richard," Collins yelled, waving his phone. "Stop. It's over." "What?" Richard froze. "The bank just called." Collins panted, running up the aisle. "The coercion clause. It triggered automatically." "What are you talking about?" Cynthia screamed. "The new will." Collins explained, breathless. "It was set up with a digital trigger. If an attempt to sign the waiver was recorded or reported, the accounts freeze. All of them." He looked at his phone screen. "The 85 million for the resort? Transferred out. The operating accounts? Locked. Your personal accounts? Frozen pending fraud investigation. Transferred where?" Barrett whispered, his voice trembling. Collins looked at me. "To the sole beneficiary. To Mallory." The words hung in the air. Barrett let out a sound like a wounded animal. No, that's my money. I'm the CEO. He charged at me. His face was twisted into a mask of pure hate. He looked like a demon. You witch. Give it back. I didn't move. I didn't flinch. I just looked at him. Before he could reach me, the two security guards, the ones he had hired, stepped in front of me. They grabbed Barrett by the arms and slammed him onto the stage floor. Get off me. Barrett screamed, kicking and thrashing. Do you know who I am? Mr. Nash, you are causing a disturbance, the guard said coldly. We're going to have to ask you to leave. The irony was so sharp it almost cut. Richard slumped against the podium, looking old and defeated. Cynthia collapsed into a chair, sobbing into her hands, sobbing for her lost status, her lost money, her lost world. I looked at the pen still sitting on the podium. The ink blot had dried. I picked it up. Mallory, Richard rasped, looking up at me with pleading eyes. Mallory, please. We're family. We can work this out. Barrett just made a mistake. We can share. You need guidance running a company this big. I looked at him. I looked at the man who had called me simple, the man who had sold my future. Share, I asked softly. I walked over to the waiver. I took the pen, and in big, bold letters, right across the page, I wrote, void. I capped the pen and dropped it onto the table. It made a hollow clatter sound that signaled the end of an era. You were right, Dad, I said, my voice steady and clear, amplified by the microphone so everyone could hear. I am fit for work. I know how to fix things. But this. I gestured to him, to Barrett on the floor, to the crying mother. This is broken beyond repair. Mallory, you can't leave us with nothing. Mom wailed. We have mortgages. We have standing. What will people say? You have hands, I said. You can work. Like everyone else. I turned to Mr. Abernathy. Is there anything else needed? No, Ms. Nash, the old lawyer smiled. Everything is in order. The car outside is waiting for you. The real car. I turned to Aunt Deb. Let's go, Aunt Deb. I'm buying you dinner. Somewhere where they don't look at us like we're dirt. I'd like that. Honey, Deb beamed, linking her arm with mine. I walked down the stairs of the stage. The crowd parted for me like the Red Sea. No one laughed. No one sneered. Some of them even nodded respectfully. As I passed the valet stand outside, the head valet rushed up to me. Ms. Nash, I can bring your car around. The Honda, right? I can have it detailed. Keep it, I said, tossing him the keys. It needs a new transmission. Consider it a tip. A sleek black limousine was waiting at the curb. Mr. Abernathy held the door open. I climbed in, sinking into the leather seats. They were soft, clean. I looked out the window as we pulled away. I saw my parents standing on the sidewalk, arguing with security, looking small and pathetic. For the first time in 34 years, I didn't feel the weight of their expectations. I didn't feel the stain of the factory. I felt light. 3 months later, I stood on the balcony of a modest beach house in the Florida Keys. It wasn't an $85 million resort. It was a simple, quiet place with a view of the ocean and a garden full of hibiscus flowers. I took a sip of my coffee. Black, no sugar. Things had changed. I didn't keep all the money. I didn't need a yacht or a private jet. I kept enough to be comfortable, to ensure I never had to scrub a floor unless I wanted to. The rest? I put it to work. I bought the factory. The first thing I did was fire Gary, the incompetent supervisor. The second thing I did was replace every single valve, sensor, and safety system in the building. I gave everyone a 20% raise and full health benefits. Old man Miller retired last week. I set up a college fund for his grandkids. I also started the Rose Nash Scholarship for Engineering. It provides full tuition for underprivileged kids who are good with their hands. Kids like I used to be. As for my family, well, karma has a sense of humor. Barrett avoided jail time for the charity fraud by turning state's evidence against his crooked accountant, but he's on probation for 5 years. He works at a big box electronics store now, stocking shelves. I heard his manager wrote him up last week for being 5 minutes late. He makes $15 an hour. Richard and Cynthia had to sell the mansion to pay off the legal fees and the back taxes they had been hiding. They live in a 2-bedroom condo in a retirement community inland. No more Galas. No more Audi or 8S. They drive a used sedan. I haven't spoken to them. Aunt Deb tells me they complain to anyone who will listen about their ungrateful daughter, who stole their birthright. They still don't get it. They never will. I looked down at my hands resting on the balcony railing. The scars were still there, the jagged pink lines on my palms. But the grease was gone. The dirt was gone. For so long, I thought those stains made me unworthy. I thought they made me less than. But Grandma Rose was right. Those stains were medals. They were proof that I could touch the fire and survive. I took a deep breath of the salty air. It smelled like freedom. Did I take it too far by leaving them with nothing? Or was this exactly what they deserved? Thank you for listening. If you haven't subscribed yet, please hit that button to join our community for more stories of justice served.